I should have known something was wrong when my stepmother insisted on buying my dress. After 15 years of being treated like a walking mistake, Margaret suddenly wanted to play fairy godmother. "Oh, honey," she cooed over the phone, "you simply must let me handle this. It's going to be such a special day for the family." The family, as if I'd ever truly been part of it. "My name is Sarah, I'm 29 years old, and I live in a cramped apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my 6-year-old daughter, Emma. I work double shifts at a diner downtown and clean offices on weekends. It's not the life I dreamed of, but it's honest work, and Emma thinks I hung the moon. That's all that matters to me. But to my family? I'm the cautionary tale. The daughter who got pregnant in college, dropped out, and threw her life away. While my younger stepsister Jessica floated through Duke University on Daddy's money, I was learning how to change diapers and stretch food stamps. Jessica was getting married to some hotshot lawyer from Atlanta, and according to Margaret, this wedding was going to restore the family's reputation. Translation: everyone needed to see that at least one of Richard's daughters had turned out right. The dress arrived 3 days before the wedding. I opened the box in my tiny bedroom while Emma watched cartoons in the living room. Inside was the most hideous thing I'd ever seen, a shapeless, mustard-colored monstrosity that looked like it came from a garage sale in 1987. My heart sank. This wasn't generosity, this was sabotage. I held it up to the mirror and wanted to cry, but then Emma peeked around the doorframe. "Mommy, you're going to look like a princess," she said with such pure joy that I forced a smile. "You think so, baby?" The prettiest princess ever. So I wore the dress. Because sometimes love means swallowing your pride and protecting your child's innocence, even when you know you're walking into a trap. The wedding was at some exclusive country club in the wealthy part of town, the kind of place where they probably charged extra just for looking at the crystal chandeliers. Emma's eyes went wide when we walked in. "Mama, it's like a castle." I straightened my shoulders and took her hand. Whatever they had planned for me, I could handle it. I'd survived worse. But as we found our seats, table 12, practically in the kitchen, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Every single guest was dressed in elegant, coordinated colors, navy blues, sophisticated grays, classic blacks, everyone except me. In my mustard disaster, I stood out like a neon sign. This wasn't just humiliation. This was calculated, premeditated psychological warfare. And the worst part? I could see Margaret across the room, whispering to other guests and glancing in my direction with this satisfied little smile. I wanted to run. But then the music started, and Emma squeezed my hand excitedly, and I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This was only the beginning. Hey there, incredible viewers. If you're already hooked by this story, imagine where it's about to go. This is just the tip of the iceberg of family dysfunction and shocking revelations. Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. And definitely leave me a comment about the worst family gathering you've ever experienced. Now, let's get back to Sarah's story, because what happens during the ceremony will leave you absolutely speechless. The ceremony should have been beautiful. Jessica looked stunning in her designer gown, walking down an aisle lined with white roses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The groom, Blake, stood waiting with this confident smile that screamed, "Old money." But I couldn't focus on the fairy tale. I was too busy watching the guests. Every few minutes, someone would turn to stare at me. They'd whisper something to their companion, who would then also turn to look. Some tried to be subtle. Others didn't bother hiding their amusement. I felt like a zoo animal. Emma, bless her heart, was completely absorbed in the ceremony. She whispered questions about the flowers, the dress, why everyone was so quiet. I answered as best I could while dying inside. Then came the vows. Jessica spoke about finding her perfect match and how Blake made her feel like the most special woman in the world. Standard wedding stuff. But when Blake took the microphone, something in his voice made me look up. "Jessica," he began, "you've shown me what it means to be part of a real family. A family that values loyalty, integrity, and taking care of each other." He paused, and his eyes swept the crowd. For just a moment, they landed on me, and I swear I saw something that looked like pity. "Family means everything," he continued. "It means never letting someone you love face the world alone. It means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Strange words for wedding vows, but the crowd ate it up. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. My father Richard nodded approvingly. I should have paid more attention to what Blake was really saying. After they kissed and everyone cheered, we moved to the reception hall. More whispers, more stares. Emma and I found our table, and I helped her order from the children's menu while trying to ignore the sideways glances. That's when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. Two women at the next table were talking, their voices just low enough that they thought I couldn't hear. "I still can't believe Margaret actually went through with it," one said. "The dress thing? Oh, honey, that's nothing compared to what she has planned for the speeches." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "She's been telling everyone that Sarah's going to get up and make some kind of scene, that she's jealous and desperate for attention. Margaret's been setting the stage for weeks." "But what if she doesn't actually do anything?" The other woman laughed, low and cruel. "Oh, she will. Margaret's made sure of that." I gripped Emma's hand under the table. My mind was racing. What did that mean? How could Margaret be sure I'd make a scene? Then I saw her. Margaret was making her way through the tables, stopping to chat with guests, always with that same satisfied smile. She was working the room like a politician, and I had the sinking feeling that I was about to become her campaign speech. Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, why does your face look scared?" I forced another smile. "I'm not scared, baby. Just thinking." But I was scared, because I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about humiliating me in an ugly dress. This was bigger. This was orchestrated. And I had no idea how deep it went. The DJ announced that dinner would be served soon, followed by speeches. Margaret caught my eye across the room and raised her champagne glass in my direction, like she was toasting me or targeting me. I looked around the room, at all these well-dressed people who'd been whispering about me, at my father who hadn't even acknowledged my presence, at Jessica, who was too busy being the center of attention to notice her sister drowning. That's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I wasn't just attending this wedding. I was the evening's entertainment. Dinner was torture served on fine china. Every course felt like an eternity. Emma chattered about the fancy napkins and the tiny forks for tiny food, completely oblivious to the psychological warfare happening around us. I tried to eat, but my stomach was in knots. I kept replaying that overheard conversation. Margaret had been planning something for weeks. She'd told people I was going to make a scene. But how could she guarantee that unless she was going to force me to? Between the salad and the main course, Margaret stood up and clinked her fork against her wine glass. The room quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying perfectly across the room. "Before we get to the official speeches, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge how wonderful it is to have the whole family here tonight." Her eyes found mine across the room. Family is so important, isn't it? Through thick and thin, through good times and challenging ones, we stick together. A few people nodded. Someone said, "Here, here." Now, I know some families have their little dramas, Margaret continued with a light laugh. Their black sheep, shall we say. But that just makes the success stories even more precious. My face burned. Emma looked up at me, confused by the tension she could feel radiating from my body. "Speaking of success stories," Margaret's voice grew warmer. Jessica has always been such a joy. Straight A's, sorority president, now marrying a wonderful man from a wonderful family. She's everything we could have hoped for in a daughter. The implication hung in the air like smoke. If Jessica was everything they hoped for, what did that make me? Margaret sat down to polite applause, but she wasn't done. I could see it in her eyes. That was just the warm-up act. During the main course, I noticed something else disturbing. People kept approaching our table. Distant relatives, family friends, people I barely recognized. They'd make small talk. With me, asking about Emma, about my little job at the diner, about whether I was dating anyone special. Each conversation felt like an interrogation disguised as concern. "It must be so hard raising Emma all by yourself," said Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister. "Are you getting any help? Government assistance?" asked someone I didn't even know. "Emma's father. He's not in the picture at all?" This from Margaret's sister, delivered with fake sympathy that fooled no one. Each question was designed to highlight my failures, my struggles, my single-parent status. They were building a case against me, piece by piece, in front of the entire wedding reception. Emma, sweet. Emma tried to defend me. "My mommy works really hard," she told Aunt Patricia. "She makes the best pancakes, and she reads me stories every night, and she's the strongest person in the whole world." The adults smiled at her with that condescending look people give children, who don't understand adult complexities. It made me want to scream, but the worst was yet to come. As dessert was being served, Jessica approached our table. She looked radiant in her wedding gown, every inch the perfect bride. For just a moment, I thought maybe she was coming to actually talk to me, sister to sister. "Sarah," she said, her voice sweet as honey, "I'm so glad you could make it tonight." "Of course," I replied carefully. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She glanced around, making sure people were watching. "I wanted to ask you something. Would you mind if I mentioned you in my speech? I know we haven't always been close, but family is family, right?" Every instinct I had screamed danger. But what could I say? "No, don't mention me. That would make me look petty and jealous. She had me trapped." "Of course," I heard myself say. Jessica's smile widened. "Wonderful. I think everyone would love to hear about my big sister." As she walked away, Emma looked up at me with excitement. "Mommy, she's going to talk about you, like you're famous." I managed to smile back, but inside, I was screaming. Because I finally understood the game. They weren't just going to humiliate me, they were going to make me complicit in my own destruction. They'd set up the story, planted the seeds, and now they were going to make it look like everything that happened next was my own fault. The DJ announced that speeches would begin in 5 minutes. 5 minutes until whatever Margaret had planned finally came to light. 5 minutes until I discovered just how cruel family could really be. I looked around the room one more time, at all these people who'd been watching me, judging me, building their case against me all evening. Then I looked down at Emma, still excited about the pretty dresses and fancy food, completely trusting that the adults around her were good people. I had to protect her. Whatever was about to happen, I had to shield my daughter from the worst of it. But deep down, I knew that was going to be impossible. The speeches began with Blake's father, a silver-haired judge who spoke eloquently about love, commitment, and the joining of two fine families. Standard father of the groom material. Then came Jessica's college roommate, sharing cute stories about late-night study sessions and Jessica's organizational skills. Everyone laughed at the appropriate moments. I started to relax slightly. Maybe I'd been paranoid. Maybe Margaret's plan, whatever it was, had been abandoned. Then Margaret stood up. "My turn," she announced brightly, taking the microphone from the DJ. I promise to keep this short and sweet. The room settled into expectant silence. Emma straightened in her chair, excited to hear about our family. Margaret began simply enough. She talked about watching Jessica grow up, about being proud to be her stepmother, about the joy of seeing her find true love. "But you know," Margaret continued, her tone shifting slightly, "being part of this family has taught me so much about different kinds of strength." Here it comes, I thought. We all face challenges in life. Some of us handle them with grace and dignity. Others. She paused, letting her eyes find me across the room. Others make choices that define not just their own futures, but impact everyone around them. My mouth went dry. Emma looked up at me, sensing the change in atmosphere. "For instance," Margaret continued, "when a young woman gets pregnant in college, she has options. She can make mature, responsible decisions. Or she can choose a path that burdens everyone who loves her." Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't happening. She wasn't actually doing this at her daughter's wedding, but she was. "Now, I'm not judging anyone," Margaret said with fake magnanimity. "Lord knows we've all made mistakes. But when those mistakes become patterns, when someone consistently makes poor choices and then expects family to clean up the mess," she shook her head sadly, as if disappointed, but not surprised. "Sarah, honey, would you stand up for a moment?" The room went dead silent. Every eye turned to me. Emma grabbed my hand, confused and frightened by the sudden tension. What?" I stammered. "Oh, come on, don't be shy. I was just telling everyone how you've struggled, and I thought maybe you'd like to share your perspective. About raising Emma alone, about the challenges you've faced." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Refuse, and I'd look defensive and rude. Accept, and I'd be participating in my own public execution. "Mama?" Emma whispered. I looked at my daughter's frightened face, then at Margaret's expectant smile, then at the sea of faces staring at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "No, thank you," I said as steadily as I could. "This is Jessica's day." Margaret's smile never wavered. "Oh, how thoughtful. Always thinking of others, aren't you? Even when others might not return the favor." She turned back to the crowd. "You see, that's what I admire about Sarah. She's learned to be self-sufficient out of necessity. When Emma's father disappeared, and really, can we blame him? Sarah had to figure things out on her own." My vision started to blur around the edges. People were murmuring now, some looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward like they were watching a car crash. And she has figured it out, in her own way, working at that little diner downtown, living in that tiny apartment. It's not much, but it's hers, right, Sarah? I couldn't breathe. This was worse than anything I'd imagined. She wasn't just humiliating me, she was dissecting my entire life in front of everyone I'd grown up with. Emma started to cry. Quiet, confused tears that broke my heart into a million pieces. "Of course," Margaret continued, "we've tried to help over the years, but Sarah's always been so independent, so proud, sometimes too proud to accept the kind of help that might actually make a difference in her life." The implication was clear. I was too stubborn and prideful to accept their charity, and therefore my struggles were my own fault. "But that's okay," Margaret said with poisonous sweetness. "We love Sarah just the way she is, our little survivor." She raised her champagne glass. "To family, in all its forms." Half-hearted applause scattered through the room. People didn't know how to react to what they'd just witnessed. I sat frozen, holding my crying daughter, feeling like I'd been flayed alive in front of 100 people. But Margaret wasn't finished. "Now, Jessica wanted to say a few words about her sister, but I think we've heard enough family sharing for one evening," she said with a laugh. "Let's let the bride and groom have their moment, shall we?" And just like that, she'd stolen even Jessica's opportunity to potentially show kindness. She'd controlled the entire narrative, painted me as pathetic and burdensome, and made it look like she was protecting Jessica from having to acknowledge me further. It was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. I needed to leave. I needed to get Emma out of there before this got any worse. But as I started to gather our things, something happened that no one, especially not Margaret, saw coming. Blake stood up, and the look on his face suggested that the real show was just beginning. Blake didn't ask for the microphone. He simply took it from Margaret's hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so quietly forceful, that the entire room went silent. Margaret's confident smile flickered for the first time all evening. "Thank you, Margaret," Blake said calmly. "But I think there are a few things that need to be said." He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at Jessica. He was looking directly at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen from anyone in my family for 15 years. "Respect. Ladies and gentlemen," Blake began, his lawyer's voice carrying easily through the room. "I've been part of this, in family for 2 years now. I've attended the birthday parties, the holiday dinners, the casual gatherings. And I've watched something that deeply disturbs me." Jessica reached for his arm, but he gently stepped away from her. "I've watched a woman be systematically excluded, diminished, and humiliated by the people who should love her most. I've watched a hard-working single mother be treated like an embarrassment instead of an inspiration." My heart stopped beating. "This couldn't be happening. Sarah," Blake continued, still looking at me, "I want you to know that everything Margaret just said about you is wrong. Dead wrong." Margaret's face had gone white. "Blake, what are you doing?" He ignored her. "You're not a burden. You're not a mistake. You didn't throw your life away when you had Emma. You saved it." People were shifting in their seats, murmuring. Some looked shocked. Others looked like they were finally seeing something they'd been blind to for years. "I know your story, Sarah. Not the version this family tells, but the real story. I know you were working 3 jobs while going to college. I know Emma's father didn't just disappear. He was married to someone else and threatened to destroy your reputation if you ever contacted him again." The room erupted in whispers. How did he know that? I'd never told anyone the whole truth about Emma's father. Blake's voice grew stronger. "I know you've never asked this family for a single penny, even when you were working 16-hour days and living on crackers and peanut butter. I know you turned down multiple job offers in other cities because you didn't want Emma to grow up without knowing her grandfather." He gestured toward my father, who was staring at his plate in shame. "I know all of this because I hired a private investigator." The words hit like a bomb. Jessica gasped. Margaret actually staggered backward. "That's right," Blake continued. "When I decided to marry into this family, I wanted to understand the dynamics. I wanted to know why someone as smart and capable as Sarah was being treated like a pariah." He turned to address the room directly. "Do you want to know what I found? I found that Sarah graduated summa cum laude from UNC Charlotte while raising a baby. I found that she's been Employee of the Month at that little diner 7 times in the past 2 years. I found that she volunteers at Emma's school despite working 2 jobs. I found that she's been quietly paying off her mother's medical bills. Yes, Margaret, she's been helping pay for your diabetes medication for 3 years." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She had no words. "But most importantly," Blake said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room, "I found that Emma is the happiest, most well-adjusted, most loved child I've ever met. And that's because of Sarah, because of her sacrifice, her strength, her relentless love." Tears were streaming down my face now. Emma had stopped crying and was looking up at me with wonder. Blake walked over to our table. He knelt down next to Emma's chair. "Emma, sweetheart, your mommy is a hero. Don't let anyone ever tell you different." Then he stood and faced the room one last time. "I came here tonight prepared to marry Jessica, but I can't marry into a family that treats someone like Sarah the way she's been treated. I can't pretend that what happened here tonight was acceptable." Jessica was crying now, reaching for him. "Blake, please, we can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," he said gently but firmly. I've seen enough. He set the microphone down on our table and looked at me one more time. Sarah, you deserve better than this. You always have. Then he walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind a room full of people who finally understood that they'd been watching the wrong person all these years. The silence that followed was deafening, until Emma stood up on her chair and started clapping, just my 6-year-old daughter, applauding the man who'd finally told the truth, and slowly, one by one, other people started clapping too. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to let me know that I wasn't alone anymore. The standing ovation lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Margaret had disappeared, literally vanished from the reception hall like she'd been swallowed by the earth. Jessica stood at the head table in her wedding gown, tears streaking her makeup, looking lost and abandoned. But for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the one people were staring at with pity. Emma tugged on my dress, that horrible mustard-colored dress that now seemed like the most honest thing in the room. Mommy, can we go home now? I want to tell you something. I nodded, gathering our things. But as we headed toward the exit, something beautiful happened. People stopped me. Real conversations this time, not interrogations. Sarah, I'm so sorry, said Aunt Patricia, tears in her eyes. I had no idea about the medical bills, about any of it. My father's business partner approached next. My company is looking for an office manager. The pay is good, and there are benefits. Would you be interested? One after another, people who had watched me be humiliated for years finally saw me clearly. Not all of them. Some left quietly, embarrassed by their complicity. But enough to matter. The most surprising moment came from Jessica herself. She approached us in the parking lot, still in her wedding gown, her veil askew. Sarah, wait. I turned, instinctively pulling Emma closer. I'm sorry, Jessica said simply. I knew what Margaret was planning, and I let it happen. I wanted the perfect wedding so badly that I was willing to sacrifice you for it. She looked down at Emma, then back at me. Blake was right. You are a hero, and I've been a coward. I didn't know what to say. 15 years of hurt don't dissolve with a single apology. But it was a start. I don't expect forgiveness, Jessica continued. But I want you to know that I'm going to make changes. Starting with asking Margaret to leave our house. Jessica, no, I mean it. Blake walked away from me tonight, and you know what? He was right to do it. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be Margaret's perfect daughter. We stood there in the parking lot, two sisters who'd been strangers for too long, finally seeing each other clearly. Can I take Emma for ice cream sometime? Jessica asked hesitantly. I'd like to get to know my niece, Emma piped up before I could answer. Do you like chocolate sprinkles? Because Mommy says life's too short for vanilla. For the first time in years, Jessica laughed. Really laughed. Not the polite society laugh I was used to hearing. I love chocolate sprinkles, she said. We didn't hug. We weren't ready for that yet. But something had shifted. The drive home was quiet. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. But as I carried her up to our apartment, our small, humble, honest apartment, she stirred and whispered something that made me cry all over again. Mommy, that man was right. You are the strongest person in the whole world. 3 months later, I got a new job with benefits and weekends off. 6 months later, Jessica and I had coffee for the first time in a decade. A year later, Emma had an aunt who actually showed up for her birthday party. Margaret never contacted us again. Last I heard, she was living with her sister in Florida, spinning new stories about how she was the victim in all of this. But here's what I learned from that night. Sometimes the most beautiful moments come from the ugliest situations. Sometimes, someone you least expect becomes your voice when you've lost your own. And sometimes the family that matters most isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you build with love, truth, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Blake never did marry Jessica, but he sent Emma a birthday card that year with a note. To the daughter of the bravest woman I know. Emma keeps it on her dresser next to a photo of us at her school graduation, both of us beaming with pride. That mustard dress? I donated it. To charity. But first, I had it dry cleaned and wrote a note to include with it. This dress survived the worst night of my life and came out beautiful on the other side. May it bring you strength, because that's what I learned that night. Sometimes you have to walk through hell to find out you're fireproof, and sometimes, when you're at your lowest moment, someone unexpected will remind you that you're not alone. And you never were. Family loyalty should never come at the cost of human dignity. True strength isn't staying silent when someone hurts you. It's knowing your worth even when others forget it. I want to ask you something that might hit close to home. When was the last time you stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves? When was the last time someone stood up for you when you needed it most? If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength or inspired you to be someone's voice when they've lost their own, please hit that like button and share this video. Leave me a comment about a time when someone unexpectedly stood up for you or when you found the courage to defend someone else. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because stories like this, stories about real people finding their strength in the darkest moments, are what this channel is all about. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of this community. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself and others when it matters most.